This video was originally recorded March 2020 at Menla Retreat at Dewa Spa in Phoenicia, New York. Hope you're staying safe, healthy, and happy during the quarantine. Tashi Delek, and thanks for tuning in.
Hi everybody. Those of you who are still hanging out with us live stream, I'm happy to see you. I hope you're all well and probably homebound for these few weeks that we're going to be homebound. I really don't think it would be longer than that, my personal opinion. I'm kind of homebound. In fact, I was delighted seeing something that somebody said online somewhere. I'm sorry I can't give proper attribution because I don't remember where. But it impressed me in that she said, I think it was definitely a woman who did it, she said, what I feel like is that Mother Nature has sent everyone on the planet to their rooms to think about what I have done. Rooms or tents, we should say, for the tens of millions who are in refugee situations. But anyway, everyone is at home thinking about how we're living. And we're on retreat, and we're thinking, so it's great that we're thinking about Tsong in that context. We're taking advantage of that, and you are really great doing that. So, where we left off last time is, by the way, I'm very guilty, I must say. I've been homebound, but it's very strenuous to be homebound, like cooking and cleaning and helping everybody and dealing with things, and worrying and watching the news and watching the press conferences and things. So that can be strenuous. And I've been doing some retreat work, like sadhana type things, and trying to stay cheered up and stay everybody cheered up. And so I'm feeling a little guilty. I feel like maybe I should rush out and try to get this virus and then hope for a mild case and then be immune and so be able to go around and help people without worrying about it. But I've been restrained from doing that by my better half. And although maybe I have it anyway, I don't know, like my voice is like that, but I don't have a sore throat. So anyway, here we are with Tsong, and where I left off last time was I was talking about his four great deeds, as they're called. I think I talked quite a bit about his emptiness issue, and now I'm talking about his four great deeds. And I talked about the first one, which was the Maitreya temple and statue refurbishment, when everybody had the mass visions and so forth, and the whole orientation toward the future, being more positive than the present, which is something we should know. We've reached a kind of nadir. The last few years has been a really tough thing worldwide, things going wrong, but also people waking up. Greta Thunberg being the oracle for the Mother Earth, Persephone, Gaia, whatever you want to call her, and telling us, speaking truth to power in our society, and doing so from the point of view of a very fragile young person representing the future generations, and therefore unstoppable in the subconscious impact. Even those fossil fuel, mavericks and sort of libertarian people who are insisting, and also big ag and big food, farm business who are insisting, and all of those who are refusing to take seriously or damage to the planet. They still, when they hear what she says, it goes right in, even though they ridicule her and they say she should chill out and all this kind of thing. But it goes right in because it comes from this unimpeachable vessel, rather than some sort of annoying professor like someone like me. It comes from like a child who's a teenager who has been dismembered and remembered as an oracle for the Mother Earth and for the spirits of nature and for the animals, So she's been happy. There's not much airplane flights disturbing the stratosphere. There's not much power generating going on because the industrial things have ground to a halt here and there. So we may be decreasing pollution for a few weeks, few months, which could only be good. We really should be systematically doing it all year round while also functioning as a society, which is where we're going to go. I promise you. And you should promise the world that and get that vision in your mind. We're going to win and we're going to make it right. Now that we've been to our rooms about this unstoppable little inner life bug that's crawling at us. Okay, we're trying to. So anyway, so then he did that with the Maitreya, looking to the positive future. Then he did the Vinaya, to keep the institution, the schools going, and the universities going in Tibet, which was done through monasticism as opposed to militarism, and therefore he founded the Vinaya conference, where he got everybody to revise their ethics, and especially the monastics, because it's in the monastics where they get out of the ordinary tribal and family system through that special spiritual and intellectual and scientific re-education in the monastic universities inherited from the great Nalandas and Vikramashilas and Vallabhis and Ratnagiris and so forth in India, the thousands of them that were there, and then thousands of them in Tibet. So he wanted to create, to solidify that foundation by getting their ethics up to speed. And then the third one was the Great Prayer Festival, which is I think where I sort of stopped, where he created the 2-week Miracle Festival, which we celebrate in Tibet House, just as an omen. We celebrate that this will continue every Lunar New Year at Carnegie Hall by the grace of Philip Glass and his wonderful artist friends who do pro bono, do their great concert for us. And Allen Ginsberg did it, David Bowie came and did it, all wonderful great people. Patti Smith is our real soldier for it. And so we've been doing that. And that's what we're referring to as the third great deed of him doing that. And he didn't do that for some particular school. He did that before even building his own monastery that was the first name of his school, because that's what great charismatic and brilliant and effective teachers did in Tibet. They would found a new school by founding a new monastery and so on. And he resisted doing that. Instead, he created a festival for the whole community of people from all schools and even non-Buddhist people to come to Lhasa and have a completely spiritual retreat every New Year for 2 weeks, not just the one day or the one night, to make your New Year's resolution. 2 weeks of trying to a little bit change your habits and set up good habits for the following year. Imagine if we did that. We voluntarily put the economy on a kind of hold or at a stabilized but hold place and spent 2 weeks thinking about the meaning of what we're doing. Everybody in the whole society, we should really do that. Kind of we do it at Christmas. We kind of do it maybe at Easter, Passover, Christmas, Hanukkah. We have these two main points in the year. Then maybe the Jewish New Year, they have the different in our different ethnicities. Different people have New Years also. Rosh Hashanah and things like that. So those are all good. They're all pointing in that direction, and that was his third great deed. And then the key thing that I didn't mention, I think, in enough detail last time. Remember, I said I would talk about the fourth great deed, and this would take me into the territory of Tantra, which I'm going to do. But I just want to say, last thing about the third great deed that was so special was where Tsong Khapa created this, he used funds given to him for a monastery. Instead of using it for his own monastery, he spent a fortune, he spent all of it actually, on and stimulated the donors, the powers that be, the aristocracy and so forth, to the different local kings, to refurbish all the shrines in Lhasa that represented the original Indian Buddhism and the Nyingma Buddhism and the Dharma kings and Guru Rinpoche and all this sort of thing. None of the later schools or anything in particular, And he then fashioned these celestial ornaments for the Shakyamuni statue in the central cathedral, the sort of Notre Dame of Lhasa. The Jokam, as it's called, and he offered them in a ceremony in 1409 to the kind of a breastplate, earrings, crown, jewels, and so forth. Exquisite red gold, rose gold, with all kinds of diamonds and rubies and emeralds and things in them. He offered to them, and what this meant was it meant that don't lament that the Buddha seemed to have passed away thousands of years ago, and therefore you don't have the opportunity to really realize the teaching, the freedom from suffering, the ethicality, the bodhisattva attitude, altruism, etc., the wisdom of the knowing what reality is. enlightenment, that it's sort of far away, and maybe if you had known Buddha, maybe you could have done something good, but now you're just going to be sort of ordinary and then just go to church once in a while. It's sort of like people get on religions when they're founded by someone in an ancient history, and then they're waiting for a second coming, so to speak, or they're waiting for Maitreya in the case of the Buddhists, or waiting for the Mahdi for the Muslims, waiting for Kalki for the Hindus, waiting for the Messiah for the Jews, and waiting for Jesus for the Christians. In other words, people get into that mode, and then they get into the excuse about themselves that they can't really be nice. They can't listen to Sermon on the Mount. They can't listen to Buddha's ethic or Muhammad's Islam, surrender to the will of the all-compassionate one. They can't listen to this because Krishna's thing about love everybody. They can't listen to it because they're in a dark age, and they got to just stay alive, and at least they can say a few prayers, but they're just going to do business normally and be rough and tough on other people. And then later they'll regret that they were too harsh, and etc. And then they'll repent when they die. That's kind of sort of half thing. What Tsong Khapa did there was he set a symbol in the Tibetan society of what I call millennial consciousness. That is to say, how people would behave in the New Jerusalem. Let's say, to use Christian messianism, or in Israel, if it was really peaceful, the light unto the nations, everybody loved it, there were no disgruntled people, displaced or disgruntled people, everybody was included in it, which is what the real messianic thing is for Israel, for example. How would then people behave if all their wishes were fulfilled? They didn't have the excuse of exile or, Holocausts or whatever to then act mean and tough themselves. What would they do? And that's called millennial consciousness. After that, Christ is all in all. God is in everyone. They all say those messianic things. Kalki comes, and then everybody's in the lap of Vishnu. And future Buddha comes in, and everybody attains enlightenment in one day because Buddha gives them a little gem, and then when they look at that gem, they become enlightened. And they have like a fabulous infrastructure, and the planet is easygoing, and etc. So that's millennial consciousness. So, and what that is it is like where you think that I'm in a perfect situation for the way I am. The nature loves me. The environment is absorbing my carbon, gives me back oxygen. I can use my human intelligence to discover what the reality of it is. I can really therefore be more loving and kind and more happy. Now, I don't have to wait for Buddha to come back. I don't have to just moan and groan that I'm not back when Jesus was there, or Buddha was there, or somebody, or Krishna was there, or whoever. I can be Krishna now, be Jesus now, be Buddha now, at least to whatever degree I can. This is kind of millennial consciousness, feeling that you're already in the best possible world, It's something normally esoteric because, of course, when really addicted to negativity type of people get that as a theory only rather than a kind of feeling. And then they can use the theory as an excuse for behaving badly because, well, I can have a war because it's still the best of all possible worlds, so let me go and kill people in the next country and take their oil wells or take their jewels or whatever, if some really stupid people hear it, they might misunderstand it. But somehow, at least in Tibet at that time, and maybe today, Mega Point, like Teilhard de Chardin, if there are various, like Buckminster Fuller, there are various kinds of utopianists who say that maybe the modern time could be that if we use our intelligence. Because we have the infrastructure, we could feed everybody on this planet. We could not have a overpopulation problem if we made sure that every woman on this planet was educated to choose herself and had the freedom to choose how many children she wanted to have. None of them are going to have 10 or 20 if they do. So, if we use intelligence, our human intelligence, we can definitely live well on this beautiful planet that is made for us to live on, and while taking care of animals and not harming them and using them as industrial components in horrible feedlots and chicken coops and God knows what. We could live really well. We could eat well, live well, be happy, have a nice time, and have no one in terrible situations. No need for wars and things. There's no reason we can't do that. And so as Dalai Lama tells us that there's no reason we cannot have a 21st century where really good things can happen. So that's what that is that's switching to millennial consciousness rather than some kind of aspiring consciousness where one thing we take for sure in all our wish to develop is that everything is no good, and therefore we have the excuse of behaving no good ourselves. And then somehow later somebody will make it right. You know, this is the shift from that kind of consciousness to millennial consciousness. And this is what Khapa did in 1409. He set the seed of that. In a way, that didn't fully ripen even in Tibet. What that led to was the demilitarization of Tibet and the educationalization of Tibet, if I could make a barbarous term, educationalization. And the monastic system was not just a matter of being pious and going to a monastery, because it was a monastic university. Because the monastic system in that tradition that is not an anti-blind faith tradition means supporting an education system where you drop out of the family system, and that's what fits with monastic. You don't have, you sublimate your sexual energy. You put your sexual energy into learning and study and visualization and realization, and you educate your whole being. Not just like some theory and then go off to Wall Street and make a fortune exploiting people. But you educate your whole being to be happier than any billionaire, no matter what your situation is, life or death, life after life. So that's what he was doing. And that ripened with the advent of the Dalai Lama government in the 17th century, where Tibet was fully demilitarized, finally. And, that's a long story, I'm not going to go into that, but just, I'm saying, so Khapa, anyway, 1409, he did that, and then from 1409 to 1414, for the next 5 years, those same donors who had seen the money they gave him to build his monastery in a more conventional way, and to solidify his teaching just in the one place, which he wasn't satisfied with that. Instead, he spent all the money on that festival, and he therefore spread this millennial consciousness in a way, and the educationalist consciousness that results from millennial consciousness, where then people realize one of the fundamental Buddhist things, when Buddha did it himself in India, in ancient India too, and Tsong did it again in Tibet. He reached that level in Tibet where it becomes a national thing that the purpose of human life is education. Education is not to train you to be success in a sort of half-baked society by being winner of the Olympics or winning $1 billion or inventing some wonderful mechanism or something. No, that's a byproduct, perhaps, in some cases. The good things coming out of that education. But education is your purpose in life, for you to learn to understand yourself and your world. Because that's the only way you get happy, is when you understand who you are and what your world is and what your opportunity is as a human being. To really know how to be happy and how to help others be happy, maximally effective, and not just other humans, animals and everyone. That's what your human life opportunity is. So it's definitely all lifelong, because it's evolutionary. Let's call it evolutionary education. You evolving through educating yourself, not limiting it to just productive education for productivity, where you're just meaning succeeding in a half-baked society, a dog-eat-dog society. It means evolutionary, where you're creating a better world. You're creating a better you. That's kind of education. Okay, and that's Buddhism. Primary thing of Buddha's vision for what human societies could be, and which he implemented in India for sure. This is how India became such a beautiful place in ancient time. Vulnerable, of course, but beautiful. Was an educationalismo society, where that becomes enshrined as the way that the collective supports the individual, is allowing every individual full education of all their faculties for as long as they live. And then some will feel they reach a certain limit, a certain place, and they'll feel they should go and do something for others, and that'll be normal. So it isn't like then everyone will starve because everyone's just sitting reading a book. Because people want to then do something, and because inspired, they will do something naturally. When they're fun, but they'll do good things, the more educated they are. Okay, so this is what, just emphasizing the sort of symbolic thing of the Great Prayer Festival, the Great Prayer Miracle Festival of 1409. Then 5 years, then he built Ganden Monastery. Ganden, the name Ganden means the heaven in which they believe, we believe, Maitreya currently dwells, from which he will descend as a Buddha some 1,000 years in the future. And so Ganden means it's sort of resonating, it's in morphic resonance with the Tushita paradise, where the next Buddha to be on this planet's Dharma center is producing more good people, good deities in that case. They're embodied as Tushita deities. There are other beings in that same heaven who are not in that Dharma center. They're just ordinary pleasure-seeking gods, although they are very fortunate people. Some of them might join the Dharma center here and there. Who knows? I don't know. I don't have a statistical census of the Tushita and how they live. I don't know that. I've never seen one. So that's what he did. So then we come to the fourth deed, okay, which is now the main topic of today. And one thing I learned from Jimba's lovely book that I hadn't realized quite. I knew sort of the story, but I didn't know the full detail of it. And that is in 1414, I believe it was. Tsong thought he would be dying. And he had told some close disciples that he had a prediction from Saraswati, who is the female form of the Bodhisattva Buddha of wisdom, sort of the female Manjushri, which was Tsongkhapa's special thing, right? He, in fact, he probably was some sort of Manjushri manifestation. But anyway, it was also his main teacher, his final teacher. And the female form of that Saraswati, he had a special relationship with her, which is why he was such a great teacher and writer, because she deals with literature and the arts and music and dance and theater, etc. She's the great patroness, the muse of in all Buddhist societies, of their they're Leonardo da Vinci artists, and they're Michelangelos, and they're Raphaels, and they're Mozarts, and the Beethovens, and whatever, and Bob Dylan's, And so he had a special relationship with her, and even she had sort of sadly but regretfully told him that he probably would go in 1414 when he was 57 years of age. That was his lifespan, which was not infrequent in Tibet, because of the diet and the high altitude, that they might live over that length. Although some lived to 150, that Menla had, some yogi types. But anyway, they told him that. But he expected that. So then his disciples got together, like in 1414, and they said, we don't want to lose our teacher. We're not accepting that prophecy. We don't live on prophecies. And Tsongkhapa really, and then Tsongkhapa was feeling really bad, started feeling sick and this, and they said, no, we're going to go do rituals. We're going to find out who is it that's limiting your life. What is the for? And so they got into all kinds of special practices and pujas and rituals and white magic, and also anticipating if there might be any black magic coming from anywhere, and dealing on that level of sort of psychic, like the one, dealing with the level of that, dealing with Agent Smith, where's Agent Smith coming and ruining our Tsongkhapa, and they did months and months they went on with it. And Tsongkhapa was feeling, and they were scared and they intensified because he began feeling really bad. And he was kind of almost like, well, maybe I'm getting ready, because he's not afraid to die. Dying is just a transition. He knew that perfectly well. He could have mastered it at any time. He might have even welcomed it, because since 1398, when he achieved his full enlightenment, corresponding with a certain physical manifestation, which he might have preferred a slightly more fun one than the hard-working monk teacher, Tibetan monk teacher, like a Vajrasattva, Vajradhara one, with a nice partner. But as a monk, he couldn't do that, didn't want to do that. He didn't want to throw away the whole educationalist foundation that he had helped revive and restore and renew. And so, but maybe once dying, then his vow is up, So, who knows? He doesn't really say. But anyway, they wouldn't let him go. So they did this, and then finally they came to him with a special thing. They said, well, and he started feeling better. And then they came to him, they said, well, we worked really hard, Your Holiness, Tsong Khapa, Guru, dear teacher, dear mentor, and all the sort of deities, local deities and spirits and whatever, demons, none of them, they're hands off you. And the long life deities are ready to see to extending your life. And Saraswati said, listen, that's what I heard. I don't want to force that. I'm far be, I'm on long with them as long as they will want, I can. So, but I had heard that and sort of knew that by some karma. And so you're going to live longer. And then there was a very interesting thing, which I'll just digress very shortly, because I have a special theory about it. But then they said to talk about there's one particular sort of demonic local deity, maybe ancient Tibetan tribal mountain deity or whatever it might be, Himalayan deity, pre-Tibet even, who says, he will lay off you and he will lay off your followers and your tradition for 13 generations based on our negotiation with him. But then he'll continue to lay off, but then we'll have to renew these pujas and we'll have to renew these rituals. And if we don't renew them, all bets are off with him. He's like a tough kind of character. And so we kind of made a deal like that with him. They said to Thurman said, forget that deal. I revoked that deal. And I mean, I don't know if maybe he psychically talked to the entity, whatever it was. They're very vague about that. He said, I don't make deals with spirits like that. And I'm thankful that they're going to lay off everybody for 13 generations. But if he pops up after that to make trouble, my followers, my successors, those down in history later, they'll handle it then. And our tradition should have prepared people to be capable of handling it. And we don't make such deals, And to such people, he should reflect about why he's enforcing what's he think he's doing, whoever it is. And I consider that is the real source of this whole, Dölgel, the Wraith King. Remember in the Lord of the Rings, the Wraith Kings who go around looking for the ring? Well, this is a Gelbo, which literally means a king, but it's a kind of demon in the Tibetan, typology, taxonomy of demons, called the Gelbo, like a Wraith King. And so the Wraith King from a place called De, which is back near the Yamdrot Lake in central Tibet, very powerful Wraith King, who comes from some very prehistoric, maybe, being in those Himalayan mountains. And that one then related to the thing that happened 13 generations ago is the 1650s, 1640s. It's after the millennial consciousness has crystallized in the form of the Dalai Lama government and under the great fifth Dalai Lama's management. And then this problem arises that lately we saw this faction that has been attacking the Dalai Lama. And they have, even the Dalai Lama and the Dalai Lama's teacher, they have a different theory about it. And, I know their theory, and in a way I think it's correct to some extent, but underlying it, I think comes from this time, actually. It's this demon. It's really this demon. It wasn't that Lama who created it, who they think is that Lama. The troublemaker is this early demon, because he feels he's not being propitiated enough to maintain his sort of demonic way, rather than be really fully like Mahakala, be a previous demon who then becomes fully good. And that's what the Buddhists want. Buddhists don't throw out demons and then kill them or something, and then just think they solved the problem. That's not the Buddhist way. The Buddhist way is much more boring and much more educationalist. They use maybe some sort of, shamanic method to trap the demon, sit them down in front of a screen, and then teach them and lecture them for centuries if necessary. on a high intensity and teach them the error of their ways so that they use their forcefulness that they have as demons for the good, and to tame them. They call it demon taming, which is not demon killing, it's demon taming. And then they tame them to be angels and be nice. That's like Mahakalas like that, and some of these fierce protectors that you see. Not the fierce archetype deities, which is a different thing. They're not dealing with such worldly issues, but they're dealing with helping us deal with our own inner demons. But these are worldly protectors. Anyway, that's a side thing. So anyway, never mind that subject for the moment. Let's get back to the thing that fourth grade key was. Tsong Khapa was so. Then what happened? And this again, I learned. This is what I learned from him. I didn't realize. From the time of 1414 to 1419, when he did actually pass away, those 5 years, Tsong Khapa turned his effort, and he had special dreams and signs from different dakinis, these animals, female Buddhas who live in the soul plane and who are guardians of the tantras and the Ati Yoga, Anu Yoga, Mahayoga, or the Kriya, Charya, Yoga Tantra, Anuttara Yoga Tantra, the Unexcelled Yoga Tantras, these amazing, marvelous, super subtle, matrix type teachings that are so amazing, the ultimate teachings for the human being who has really educated themselves to become the real astronaut of the inner teachings, which I call psychonaut. These are the psychonaut teachings. And he had special signs. Well, now you can really start working on the psychonaut teachings. You've established the exoteric teaching universities really well. You've given the great physical and biological theories of emptiness and karma, or emptiness, freedom, and karma, which is evolution. And so there's a big body of people who are going to make great progress in that over the coming centuries. And then they can use these more advanced ones, so you can be more explicit and you can teach the secret teachings more explicitly in the coming time. And these 5 years, you can especially focus on writings that make the Tantra more accessible to more people. And so he did like what the great 14th Dalai Lama, who, by the way, is settling the problem of that demonic being. He is definitely settling it now. He has. He's turning that, but not destroying that guy, turning him to the good. Ultimately, I think we will see how that being will be harnessed and tamed to behave himself and stop this trouble. That will definitely occur, I predict. And His Holiness will do, the great 14th Dalai Lama will definitely do that. And His Holiness, the great 14th Dalai Lama, also has authorized me and other people to actually show to the scientific world what the inner science, the psychic, the inner neuroscience of the Unexcelled Yoga Tantras and the perfection stage and the creation stage, etc. So anyway, Tsong Khapa did that then. Then he did his greatest writings on the using the basic template of the Guhya Samaja, the esoteric community Tantra, and he did that. And at a certain moment in doing that, I believe after 2 or 3 years of writing and really getting deeper into all of that, he still would be teaching the exoteric teachings here and there, and even the logic and everything, because he unified all these things, and he harnessed them all together most beautifully. But he was focusing a lot on these tantras, and especially on this. He wrote these great works on the Guhya Samaja, the brilliantly illuminating lamp. We have translated that one. There's a version of a summary of the ocean of successes that my colleague Gail Bentor has translated with working with her Tibetan colleague and Tenzin and someone. And then we're doing more and more of these things here. And this is what happened at that time. And Jimba explained how that happened. He has wonderful chapters here called the Yogi of Glorious Guhya Samaja, and that's the famous Father Tantra of the Unexcelled Yoga Tantras. And then the Yogi of the Chakrasambhara Tantra, that's the famous Mother Tantra. And showing how the Father Tantra develops, especially in Tantra, the magic body side of things, the male compassion, artistry of compassion, of creating a higher mandalic world, That's what that is. And then the clear light is the mother one is the clear light, and this is the constant purification of that and the purification of the world. Very amazing thing. Chakrasambhara and Hevajra being the most famous one, and Guhya Samaja being the most famous, and Yamantaka being the most famous Father Tantra. So, and with all of them touching on the Ati Yoga, the Nyingma Ati Yoga thing, although they didn't really fit that together in those days, but now this present great 14th Dalai, they are being fitted together in a very creative way by many other people. But anyway, then this leads to his fourth great deed. And so the fourth great deed was where he decided that he wanted to make three-dimensional mandalas. And, because he had been so vividly visualizing and realizing the 62 deity community and mandala of the Chakrasambhara, the Mother Tantra, with the Heruka main figure and the Vajrayogini consort, and then the four inner yoginis, and then the 24 couples, blue, red, and white, and then the 8 ferocious guardian females, animal-headed female guardians of the blood mandala. That's an amazing mandala, and associated with Mount Kailash. And then the 32 deity Guhya Samaja Father Tantra, with Vajra, Akshobhya, the Akshobhya mandala, 32 deities. And then the Yamantaka, and the various versions of the Yamantaka, but they never will say the word Yamantaka, and so they just say the Vakindra, the Lord of Speech, sort of Manjushri, which relates to Manjushri, that one, and which is another Father Tantra, most fierce one, you could say, and dealing with the difficult age that we live in, and fierce compassion, when the conqueror of death, the death of death, you could call it. So a vision of the immortal life, of the bliss, freedom, indivisible, bliss, voidness, or bliss, freedom, indivisible, as the death of death. Where the Yama, the Indian god of death, it becomes like a guardian of life. Actually, that's the ultimate. The ultimate is not to sort of, get rid of death. It's to get death to support life. Is what it is. A really beautiful idea. Actually, I do like it. So what he did was he built he was so into it and so into teaching it, and there were so many advanced students who were capable of understanding it, that he wanted to make really beautiful, artistically fantastic three-dimensional mandalas, which meant making a building of gilt copper or brass, actual architectural building with beautiful molded, all a very elaborate thing. Basically, a visualization one is like a hologram that you visualize in your mind, but you sort of make it real, like like it was made of divine substances. But the only thing you could do in modern time, you might make it out of plexiglass or something, or crystal, multicolored, but you can't, because it has to be solid beams and things like that. Never mind. But, and then in that you make sculptures of the different deities, male and female deities, in these different mandalas. And these mandalas are said to be not, ordinary people shouldn't see them. They're hidden, esoteric, sort of traditionally, and some have always wanted to keep connected to the tradition. And so he felt they shouldn't be just built any old place where people are focused on exoteric studies or whatever. So he built a special hall at Gandan called the Yangbajen Hall, which interestingly is the Tibetan translation of the word Vaishali, which means sort of the vast, and Vaishali was the great city in India in Buddha's time, where Buddha used to like to go and teach, and where in the environs of which he taught the medicine Buddha teaching, and he taught different tantric teachings also. And the main citizen of the Vaishali was the famous Vimalakirti, who are famous to me because I translated that sutra. A lot of people know that sutra even in East Asia, everywhere. And so Vimalakirti was lived at Vaishali, at this vast place, Vyangbajan it's called, possessing vastness. And Vimalakirti was clearly, he's considered within the Nyingma school and also all the schools to be a kind of a senior early Mahasiddha, a great adept, contemporaneous with the Buddha, who was kind of colleague and friend of Shakyamuni Buddha's. And between the two of them, and the one short sutra dedicated to him that gives his teaching, Vimalakirti Nirdesha, he even gives his own teaching as kind of empowered to do so by the Buddha. And there's a wonderful meeting where the monastic Buddha, he's kind of acknowledged to be a lay person Buddha, which is why his sutra was so popular in East Asia, where they were always a little nervous about monasticism, or tended to be, because of their thing about the ancestor and the family. And so Vimalakirti was like, although he totally deferred to the monastics, he always respected them, even if he would criticize their philosophical view, their scientific understanding, because he was known as the most critical of criticals. Vimalakirti was personally, but he would always respect their status as great saints and great monastics. He completely did that. Venerable, he would refer to them as venerable sir. He would talk to them like that. Anyway, this kind of, so that's it. Dzongpa called that Yanbajan, he called the temple. And then in the temple, he built these three-dimensional things. And I think it says that the deities that they made were like a 2-year-old child, so they were this size. So if the deities were that size, the cubit of that deity is how you measure the size of the mandala buildings, like 100 cubits or something like that, because cubit is the distance from the tip of your middle finger to your elbow. So if the deity is the size of height of a 2-year-old, say what's that, 24 inches or 30 inches high, let's say, and then around maybe 30, maybe 24, 5, 6 inches, and then the cubit would be maybe 3 inches, the size of that deity's fingertip to forearm, and then you multiply the 3 out. So these were big constructions, actually, expensive, big. A lot of artists were working on it, and they say that in building it, the one Khanda Kapalina couple in the mind mandala row of the Chakrasambhara, the standing deity Khanda Kapalina, his name is called, and his statue was one of the first that they made of the retinue in the Chakrasambhara. And they were very freaked out when they got it out of the mold or whatever, out of the smelter or whatever you call the process. It had a kind of weird sheen on it, like an oil slick kind of, like you see multicolors in it, like an oil slick. You see like red and green and blue things in an oil slick. And so they could try to clean that, rub it, because they weren't going to paint. They might paint the faces or something later, but at first they just wanted a basic gilt looking statue, and they were rubbing. Finally, they couldn't rub out this kind of oil slick thing, and they were going to destroy it and to recast it. But they took it to Tsong to show him, and he says, "What are you going to destroy this? It's already having rainbow colors. It's magically self-consecrated. So leave it." That's Then apparently all of them had this kind of rainbow sheen, special patina. There's a story like that. And anyway, nobody knows, but there were no photographs taken of it by any of like Heinrich Harrer and everybody who never really got too deep into Buddhism. Those guys who 7 years in Tibet, etc. Because they weren't really big into Buddhism. They were mountain climbers and they were helping build dikes to prevent floods in Lhasa and things like that, and hanging out with the aristocrats, drinking tea and playing croquet and things, and showing films to the young Dalai Lama, newsreels and things, by getting the old camera working and things like that. So they weren't studying Dharma. So they never took pictures of these things. It must have existed still by then. And so by the communists melted them all down or took them all away. Nobody knows what happened to those. They must have been 3 huge structures. with maybe 7, 8, 10 feet square, within a 12-foot or 14-foot diameter circle, each one, each one of those three-dimensional mandalas. But anyway, the building of those three-dimensional mandalas in that new special, I think it's like a 64-pillar temple. And by the 64 pillar, if you multiply by 12 feet, that's like huge, quite a big temple. And they were built in there because they were only for tantric. That was kind of the root of what was called the tantric colleges, which is another one of Tsong Khapa's innovations in masses, that you had special colleges where people who went on a fast track, and they didn't do 20 years of Geshe studies, but they did some Geshe studies, and then they would, some, PhD type studies. They do go straight to postdoc, do a short undergraduate and graduate type study, and then go into postdoc scientific meditational work, like tantras, learning all the tantric arts that are involved and so on, making mandalas and things like that. And you must understand, mandala, you think of, some of you who are more new to Buddhism, I must remember in this class, you think of a mandala as a diagram that you see on a wall, which is what Western people think a mandala is. And that's a form of mandala, but that is only a blueprint of a three-dimensional building. And we used to have one, and we will again have one at Tibet House on exhibit. We've had one on loan from a monastery who has needed it back eventually. But we used to have one here in Tibet House, but we don't now. But they are like a dollhouse, actually. The ones you see now, they're much smaller, and they are very elaborate with beautiful things. And the reason that you make those 3D mandala, and the original one that you do when you're a practitioner, is you learn to visualize it so vividly and with one-pointed transic type of meditation where you go into trance, you're so concentrated, and you perceive around yourselves like looking simultaneously in all directions, as if you had a hologram around yourself of an architecture of a building. And this building is made of pure jewel substances. And it has very elaborate description how the beams are laid and what the wall ornaments are and the frescoes and the symbols and etc. It's really amazing, kind of, and with little bells ringing at the eaves by the breeze, and yak tails hanging there. I mean, very, very elaborate. And each, of course, physical architectural object in the building that you visualize has a meaning about the inner, like the jewel, the pearl apron that hangs with the yak tail from it and has little bells on it that tinkle in the wind, symbolizes the intestine, for example. When you bring it into your body and your body becomes the building, etc. I mean, it's just so exquisite, the whole thing. It's just unbelievable. And you have to have incredible mental concentration. And the reason that all such yogis have that, but people when they initially learn about this, they think, oh, I'm not an artist. I can't visualize things. Oh dear, oh dear. Like, how can anybody do that? It's so complicated. I don't want to do that. I just want to think of being in space or something. Well, of course not. But the point is, if you have a deep enough understanding of emptiness, you realize that when you just see, like I'm seeing the camera right over there in front of me, and the tripod, and the floor, and my friend over there, and the furniture in the room, and so forth. And but every single object that I perceive, my imagination is creating, actually. My imagination is producing a template of what I expect to see in form of an iPhone or a camera. And then it's taking photons that are just flickers of light that are touching all kinds of neurons and having atomic and subatomic interactions with those neurons. And then it's a buzzing, glooming, zooming confusion, as you know about if you ever got really drunk or really stoned, like it's just like whoosh, the light just pure hitting you. You can't recognize anything in it. That's why you hallucinate, when you're having a vision quest or something. But the point is, normally you just see things as very stable because you have a whole huge dictionary. Your amazing brain has a huge dictionary of objects that you expect to see, and then you sort out those light things into those seeming objects. And then you think, of course, they sort themselves out and they're just out there like that. And that's that's an illusion, actually. And you just begin to discover, the deeper you go into emptiness, the more you discover the constructive role of your own imagination when you perceive things. And and recognize what you perceive, let's say, and you realize how you overlay on what you just experienced kind of as being within your field, as being part of yourself, you know. Like when you look at a wall, you're just over in the wall. You are the wall. As a visual object, somehow you don't recognize it as a wall until you organize it into a wall with pictures on it and thermostats and light switches and electric outlets and whatever, you know, baseboards, etc. So the more you know about emptiness, the more you become aware, self-aware of your own constructive, imaginal, constructive activity in perceiving something. So therefore, the more you know that, then the more control over your imaginal constructive activity you get. So then when you visualize to see things as in a purified form or in a divine form or a celestial form, like a jeweled palace, like the wall made of sheer diamond, solid, transparent diamond, not diamond encrusted on some concrete or some wood, but pure diamond. The whole beam, the whole wall surface is diamond instead of sheetrock. Or ruby, or emerald, or sapphire, or topaz, you know. In other words, like substances that are unimaginable, that are inconceivable to the ordinary world, and you see that you create, that becomes as real to you as the regular room is real to you. That's the real mandala palace. That's what it is. And those diagrams that you see are just a kind of blueprint, and that's why when they're made of pure particles of pure color, like those Tibetan monks so beautifully do. The Indians used to sometimes just do it by hand with powder, like chalk powder, or with flower petals even. And they were so skilled, they still made it very beautiful. But the sort of level of detail that the Tibetans put in there, it's doubtful that the Indian tantrics were able to do that, but it's possible. But we don't have any evidence that they used those cones and those like wedding cake ornamenting kind of tools that the Tibetans do when they make those kind of ornaments. They make those kind of powder, pure pigment powder mandalas that they make. But those are considered to make a most powerful impression in the unconscious. So that then when you visualize, by having seen that, you somehow get into the detail and the vividness of those mandalas, which is what they are. So anyway, the reason you make them, like in the Tsongkhapa's case there, he made them out of brass and gold and silver and so forth, because he had those sponsors to do it, and this would inspire people to be able to learn to do the visualization. Is the idea, you see. And in fact, in the tantric colleges today, they make three-dimensional mandalas as part of their visualization. It's like, if you are an architect. Or if you've ever architected any structure and built yourself a treehouse or something in your yard, or I don't know what you might have built ever in your life, but if you do that, and you think of through the blueprint, and you make it, and the architects use CAD/CAM, three-dimensional computer things, and then you get really aware of 3 feet and 15 feet and 6 feet and the door that way and the window the other way, and you sort of get where you see the whole thing in your mind. That architect does, and then they see it, then they realize it in detail, and they figure out the engineering so that it's to have the right strength of substances to span this and that dimension, to hold the roof and all that kind of thing. But then you can kind of see it like a hologram. So what the practice is where you create an architecture in which you reside, and then you of course have the structure of your own body is really different. You might have 6 arms on each side, or 12 arms on each side, or you might have 4 faces looking in 4 directions, or 3 faces, all different types of things like that. That's what the whole mandala thing is about. Anyway, this was his 4th great deed, Tsongkhapa's. And in doing that, I think he started the tradition of the Tantric College, or the Tantric University, where the arts of imagining and creating and then visualizing and then actually realizing in a subtle matrix-like plane these sort of divine locations, palaces and locations and universes actually, which then sort of gives a person, a yogin or yogini who is doing this practice, and it's proven by Tsongkhapa in one of his books that the females can also do it, although in Tibet there weren't so many candidates who had the prior education because of their previous history as a male chauvinist military country. And in India also there wasn't enough highly educated females. And this is just something that can only be realized maybe in the future. In their own Dakini land, of course, they're all females, and they're very forceful, and they do what they do. But that's on a sort of different plane, you know. But the idea is, anyway, you create this sort of divine, magical mandala plane. You don't just do that again as an escapist thing where you want to just go live in a heaven. But you create that so that you can develop a kind of feeling of security and blissfulness, and you can feel you're in a completely 100% supportive environment where you do not fear death, you do not fear pain, you do anything. So then you can completely open your inner sensitivity in the neurological sense, where you can be completely open and vulnerable, and therefore you can feel inner energy flow and streaming, and even you can feel your way all the way to the bliss, freedom, indivisible, or bliss, void, indivisible, which is the realm of clear light. You know, the deepest, but actually the realest level of reality, you could say. This sort of deep, infinite energy substance that the universe is made of. And when that makes you a Buddha. And you don't feel that. You don't go through it like in ordinary human beings' death. When we go down to that level, that's when our super subtle mind escapes from our subtle mind and body, and our coarse mind and body. And our super subtle mind and body escapes from that, becomes disconnected from that, because it reaches a deeper plane where you don't need you're not connected to a particular coarse body. I know this sounds maybe confusing. This is sort of a little advanced tantra kind of unpacking. If you're interested in it, there are books now. We are developing books where you can read about it. Not that just reading about it will enable you to deal with it. Like I read a lot about it, and I can't do that. But the idea is that knowing about it gives you a map of the sort of how to go most inward into the inside an atom, how to enter the quantum realm consciously, and then living simultaneously within the coarse and quantum realm, which is what a Buddha can do. And why does a Buddha develop that? Well, first of all, that's the only way to really fully know reality. And then second of all, from that knowledge comes the compassion that is effective, that is blissful art. The compassion that reaches out to others who are suffering and think they're caught in an unreality of where it's them versus everything outside of them, rather than them as one with everything. But because of that delusion, they then are struggling with everything, and because of that, they are suffering. And then you become a skilled artist in how to help them free themselves from that, is the reasoning. So it sort of compresses the advanced stage of becoming a Buddha into, instead of multiple lifetimes, like at the sort of advanced level of biological evolution, where you're consciously evolving body and mind, it can compress it into a single human lifetime. That's like a miracle. It's a scientific, technological miracle. Sort of like using VR to become conscious without needing an external machine to your own human machine, your biological machine of your amazing brain and your amazing mind, your amazing imagination. But so everyone can become the one, which is what the Buddhist thing wants. You know, everyone becomes the one. You know. So that was his fourth great deed. Tsong Khapa's fourth great deed, and then all the wonderful books, and then Chimbalon. He says, during this period of intensive, just to look back at this, he says, what I just said, during this period of intensive writing and Chakra-sambhara, Tsong Khapa had also been giving teachings to the larger community of monks at Ganden, that's the monastery, monastic university, and also to a select group of around 100 of his senior students, giving the latter group advanced tantric instructions. Only around 100. Because the main prayer hall was open to all, and seeing the need for a separate dedicated space for the teaching and group practice of the more advanced tantric meditations, Tsong Khapa began planning the construction of a separate complex called Yangbajen or Vaishali. He gets it. He gives the Sanskrit name. Yay, Chimpa, go Chimpa. Vaishali is a sacred Buddhist site in north-central India, the location of the Buddha's favorite residence at Jetavana Grove. This was a wonderful garden that was bought by the Tsong Khapa's great sponsor, Anathapindika, his name was, or Anathapindana, who bought it by covering it with gold coins from a prince called Prince Jeta of that particular kingdom. And a place later Buddhist traditions also came to associate with the teachings of Vajrayana scriptures. Indeed they did, not just later, even in Buddha's time. That's where Vimalakirti lived, and he was a tantric siddha. You know, from our own Buddhist tantric history, which is not the Western one, but you must be conceding to academic college, fine, no problem. So it came to associate teaching of Vajrayana scriptures. The foundation stone for young Buddhism was laid by Tsong Kapa in the summer of 1416, the fire monkey year, you see. That is only 3 years, so it's 2 years after he had that life prolongation special, which was a special gift, I think, of the Dakinis, Manjushri, Buddhas. You know, they unwound like whatever biology he was still, you know, with the core, connected to his coarse body and his embodiment, his diet, and the physical illnesses and sicknesses and hardships he had lived through. Remember, he had done 3,500,000 prostrations in a cold place, you know, during his long retreat in the 1390s. 3,500,000. That's like like increasing a coarse body, like you do that. It's nearly impossible. But I don't say it's just an exaggerated number. Why would they do that? I don't agree with that. He did that. And if you'd seen it, it would have looked weird, maybe. It would have looked like he was a subtle-body, you know, already. Because he was already deeply learned by those times, you know, developed and realized even. But we're talking really super realized that he became in 1398. So I believe he did it. Because he had the drive, as a Manjushri almost, to take the human embodiment on planet Earth 2,000 years after Shakyamuni Buddha's time, and put it through the ringer to reach a stage that the people had the energy to reach back in Shakyamuni Buddha's time, when there was a lot more oxygen on the planet, and a lot less people and pollution, etc. And there was big forests all over in North India, huge. And so to do that, he had to use that human body so powerfully that therefore it was kind of going to be worn out, or no longer useful as a vehicle, by, neurologically speaking, by 1414. But they re-energized it with all these long life rites and things. Rakta Yamari, the red, blood red killer of death rituals, especially, which I don't know anything about, except that they're there, and I'm so mad and jealous about it. I want to find out about it. I'm going to. I believe. I intend to. So, anyway, foundations of the earlier in the year, Tsong Kapa had received word from Janchen Chuje Shakeishi, the senior student he has sent in his stead to the Ming court of the Yongle Emperor, that he would be returning to Tibet soon. He reached the fall of 1416 bearing gifts for his master, the most important of which was an entire set of the northern Ming block prints of the Ganyu. So the Ming emperor was sort of desperately, the Yongle emperor was desperately trying to retrieve the same inn with the Tibetan psychonauts, the great adepts of Tibet, that Kublai Khan had. So he was doing all these things, and they didn't really have a military foot in Tibet, and they didn't have, because the Ming was like that, they didn't have the control of Tibet at all, like the Mongols had. And they were also worrying about Mongols still lurking around there. And so, but they were doing all nice things for the Tibetan Buddhists, the Chinese, that the Ming emperor was. And so the idea is maybe some of the wealth coming from Ming emperor added to the wealth from the kings of the Pagmo Druva and other Tibetan sponsors of Tsong Kapa's teaching, huge, by this time, teaching activities. That gave him the funding to build these mandalas. I think that might be it. That's a very good point. So he had reached Gandhi, there's a print version, blah, 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 blah. And then I think great treatise on Tantra was written just around that time, or maybe a little earlier, some of it. Also, another disciple founded Drepung in near Lhasa, and then even a little bit later, just on his last year, someone makes Sera, the three great big monastic universities, which are more populous than the actual town of Lhasa at that time, indicating this center was like something extraordinary, like more lay people than more monastics than the lay people, because they were like a central, it was like a central thing, Like MIT, Harvard, BU, all these things are focused in this one place. So in 1417 they started to build it. Oh, I'm sorry, I exaggerated. The main hall of Yangtze was 72 pillars on the ground floor. So you multiply 72, so that would be 6 to a 6, and 12 rows of 6, right? That makes 72. 6 times 12, 72, right? Yes. And so that means, therefore, the width, if you have 12 and a half between pillars, so you have 6 pillars, so 6 times 12 and a half is 3 times 25, 75 feet wide, and then you have 12 going back, so then it is double that, so 150 feet long, this temple, so big temple, 75 by 100 feet, and usually I think it's 12 and a half that they make such a span, maybe it's a little more, but that's a really big temple. And then he built that, but that was only to house the Guhya Samaja, 32 deity mandal of Guhya Samaja, 62 deity mandal of Chakrasambhar, and the Vajra Dhatu mandal. You see, they always say that. But I think that's the Yamanda Vajra Dhatu. It could be the Vairochana Abhisambodhi mandala. That's what some people might think, but I think it was Yamantaka mandala, but maybe not. I've been thinking all along it was, but I could be wrong. I'm not sure. By calling it Vajradhatu, you think maybe it's a Vairochana mandala, like the one mentioned. I'm unsure of that actually, but I think it's Yamantaka. They never want to say Yamantaka. Nobody's supposed to ever mention the word Vajradhatu. Vajradhatu, it's terrifying, scary. So anyway, that's what they say. Inside the main hall is a large statue of the Buddha, slightly taller than the one inside Lhasa's Jokang temple. And the upper floors, that's right, and then on the second floor contain the three-dimensional mandalas of these three key tantric deities. And it's actually not the main temple building that's a great deed. It's those three-dimensional mandalas, usually the way it's taught. And notes on these measurements prepared by Tsong were later transcribed in an instructional guide by one of the attendants at 5:30. Oh, I have to look that up. I've never really followed that out. 5:32. Thank you, Jimba. Statues of the principal deities were made of pure silver, those of the retinue deities of bronze. These images, as well as the gilt bronze and gilt silver, these images, as well as the celestial mansions, were studded with turquoise, coral, and other precious gems, diamonds and rubies and emeralds too. And then he made a lot of others. So it was an amazing big temple. And talk about, here he says this story that I like. One image in particular, that of Khapa, who is, as I said, he's in the eastern direction, he's the first one in the blue deities, blue couples of the mind mandala circle, which there are 8 couples in that circle. And Khandakapala is the male, and Prachandi is his consort. From Chakrasambhar came out of the cast so brilliant that it radiated the colors of the rainbow. Seeing this, Tsong instructed the sculptors not to do any further work on that statue, like polish and rub it. They actually brought to him thinking something was wrong with the patina. But he said, no, that's good. Just clothe it in a silk robe. Deeply inspired by the sight, Tsong wrote the following spontaneous hymn to Chakrasambhar. And I didn't know this hymn. Thank you, Jimba. Again, from Heruka's celestial mansion, as an excellent source of merit for beings. Chakrasambhara, lord and consort, have appeared, adorned with skulls and in sexual union. With colorful hues and wondrous signs they've come. Their arrival here is most excellent indeed. Dokten, that was Tsongkhapa's one of his 8 inner disciples who was the most psychic, says that when the Chakrasambhara was being consecrated, Tsongkhapa had a vision of all the deities of the mandala and heard hymns and songs being sung by the Dakinis in the space above. Moved by this experience, Tsongkhapa wrote the following poetic lines. This is much later after all the construction work is done. They do a long ritual. And he says, beautiful forms with exquisite eyebrows drawn by the brush of meditation. Their bodies are slim and slender, resembling young trees. Their glowing faces rob even the moon of its splendor. Sporting eyes of blue lotus, their full lips red. They bear in their hands excellent garlands of flowers, emanating many such forms associated with erotic bliss to bring joy to the deities of the mandala. I honor you with the bliss of goddesses bearing sense objects. Go Jimba. And then at this time, Tsongkhapa composed his famous Song of the Spring Queen. Oh, that's such a great one. Dewa Chela Dewa Heruka, Dewa Rajyamala Nyan, Choga Shundo Longjo Paini, Lindsay Dewa Joa, Lashuso, Alala, Alaho, Aya, Araliho, Timekando Tonanji, Zebes, Lekunze. That's a really wonderful one. Actually, I tried to translate it once. I should have persisted. It really was terrible of me. But I'll try to channel him and do it. Allen Ginsberg and I sat down once and tried to translate this. I mean, I translated it and he Ginsbergized it. And he made it so, he didn't want to be literal. And I was like sticking to the Tibetan and wanted to be literal. And he wanted to make it really singable, like a joyous song in English. And he's a great poet, right? And I'm not. Although I might try to do it. And we did a verse or two, and I have it, I think, somewhere in notes. Have to find it. Or maybe I can remember if I think back really strongly how he wanted to do it. And then I sort of stopped doing it because I was too much stress of trying to control his poetic inspiration where he was going off. And I wanted to keep it as a translation, from the Tibetan. And there could have been a middle way if we'd had more time, in another universe, where we had more time. That Song of the Spring Queen. Ever since its composition, Song of the Spring Queen has been sung or chanted by Tsongkhapa's followers every time a ritual feast is performed on the 10th and 25th of every Tibetan month, 2 dates of special significance in the Chakrasambhara literature of Tantra. I hate that word cycle, never mind. Oh, then he had a huge Vajrabhairava statue. This they do mention. Well, maybe it was Vairochana Mandala, the third one, not Vajrabhairava. Anyway, when the consecration of the Lord Vajrabhairava statue is separate from the mandala, Tsongkhapa's senior disciple Tokten Jambal Gyatso writes, a great clap of thunder arose from a clear blue sky and was heard by everyone inside the hall. Some of the yogis practicing the 5 stages of Guhya Samaja and Chakrasambhara and the 6 branches, the 6 angas or branches of Chakrasambhara experienced visions of likenesses of Vajrabhairava appearing from all 4 directions and dissolving into the clay image. Tsongkhapa then led a series of rites of cultivation and perpetuation for the meditation deities, what I call archetype deities, in their respective halls. According to Kedab, since that day, crops have thrived in central Tibet, with rains falling on time, and the activities of teaching and practice of Dharma have flourished as never before. All in all, Tsongkhapa instituted the great Drupche festivals, the sadhana practice rites of propitiation and self-initiation of the following main meditation deities at Ganden: Guhya Samaja, according to the Arya, the noble Nagarjuna tradition, Luipa's Chakrasambhara, 13 deity Vajrabhairava, Kala Chakra, Vajrapani, Mahachakra, Vajradhatu, Sarvavit, Vairochana Abhisambodhi. 9 deity Amitayas according to Jitari's transmissions and Akshobhya. So Jimba knows because he was a monk. He was a successful Laramba, highest level PhD, like summa cum laude PhD of Ganden Monastery himself. These Drupcha, the institution of the honorable rites and practice of these tantric deities at Ganden came to be recognized as the fourth of the four great deeds of Tsong Khapa, the other three being the restoration of the Maitreya temple at Xingji, the great scriptural festival of Nyal, but that's especially the Vinaya festival of Nyal, and the establishment of the great prayer festival of Lhasa, right? Those are the four great deeds. These Drupcha related to the major tantric deities were maintained uninterruptedly until the political tragedy that swept central Tibet in 1959. And today these traditions have been revived at the re-established Ganden monasteries in southern India. So, thank you, Jimba. So that's the thing about Tsong Khapa. And then the last thing is about Tsong Khapa's death in 1419, which last year we celebrated, and it happened in the 25th day of the, which is like a yogini day actually, but the 25th day of the 10th lunar month. And that's called Ganden Namche, and it still is a national holiday in Tibet. Ganden Namche. I think the government exile might have stopped it being a national festival because it does connect to Tsong Khapa's. Some people think it's sectarian because it connects to Tsong Khapa's death day, but Tsong Khapa was not sectarian, and at his time Ganden was open to people from any school. And as one of Jimba's great things that he points out, that I learned from Jimba's thing I really love, most of his patrons were Kagyu, actually. But he did associate himself with the Kadampa school from Atisha, rather than the Kagyu school, but it has its own kind of Kagyu thing. So it wasn't sort of hardened in Tibet to people feeling the rigid sectarian thing. In a way, the sectarian thing in a way became more rigid since 1959 because they got thrown into exile, and therefore then the different groups, minority groups sort of wanted to go and have their own new sponsors to be able to reestablish themselves. And the majority group kind of hung back, which was the Gelugpa, the Gandhimar school, and they hung back because they were concerned with the majority of the Tibetans. And so then the Westerners brought their own, sectarianist kind of thing, Protestant versus this, Christian versus Jew, Muslim versus Jew versus Christian, Jew versus Muslim, blah, blah, blah. Their whole division thing about ideologies, communist versus capitalist, all that rigid conceptualization thing, I think was added in there. And then we had a bad experience of it the last 50, 60 years, which I think is getting, the Great 14th has helped it get much better, actually. It was particularly not good in the 70s. And 60s didn't really get started that much. So anyway. So that was the thing. So then when it came around finally to 1419, after this wonderful 5-year extension within which all this great Tantra thing happened, and notice how they associated the Tibetans the vital and the true practice of the great yogis with the good weather and the good harvest and the happiness in the countryside. Because, the bliss energy, and it doesn't mean because somebody's having a sexual orgy somewhere. What it means is that the bliss energy liberated by these advanced practitioners within their own nervous systems. And at some stages it involves taking the full level of Eros energy, yes. But it doesn't require, it's not ordinary sexual just huffing and puffing. And some people somewhere just having a hot date. It involves both male and female developing in their own nervous system, navel orgasm, heart orgasm, throat orgasm, brain orgasm. And again, brain to throat, throat to heart, heart to navel, navel to genital center, but not ejaculative, ordinary procreative thing. Blocking that to keep the energy in the central channels and to move it up and down in the central channels to create beings like Buddha beings who are alive at the clear light level from within the super subtle body mind of the heart chakra. And the ultimate one, by the way, is not either up into a huge blowout in the brain like Kundalini, although that is one aspect, or the one where you go down from the brain and you have like a big, or genital orgasm, but not without ejaculation, but one where that kind of orgasm is experienced completely by the whole being. And there are 4 stages of going in within the 8-petal heart chakra, which then multiplies out to 24 petals, 24 branches and so forth. The heart chakra becomes the sort of nexus of the whole thing. And then that's when the bliss permeates everywhere. And so when this group, where he said like 100 of those advanced people in his life, and then later maybe a few in Tibet became one where there was such 100 yogi center in many of the big universities and there were tantric colleges. And in the height of it, in Gyuto and Gyume, 2 of them in Lhasa, and then the 3 big monasteries had their own tantric college, each one. So there were 5 of them in that center. And so if each one had 30 or 40 people, that's like 150 or 200 of yogis who have that level of development. And as far as we know in history, there weren't 75 females in them, because the nuns group was not as well developed as far as the prerequisite understandings, just like in the case of India, because of the still dominating chauvinism, male chauvinism, of the previously militaristic societies of both India and Tibet. And so the full realization of equal number of females in the Geshe, PhD and MA and BA studies level, let's say, summa cum laude types. And then going into these advanced things like female astronauts, equal number of female astronauts and male astronauts. That would be when the whole planet is having good harvests and people are happy. Because it's like these people are like morphic resonance, subtle body mind and super subtle body mind level, something like transmitters, 5G transmitters, like 10G transmitters of this type of bliss energy that's sort of by morphic resonance experienced in the nervous systems of masses of people without them thinking about Buddhism or thinking about Tantra or even thinking about sex. They're just thinking about, well, people normally are thinking about that a lot, but these people maybe less actually in that way because they're just feeling better in general. They don't have the idea of feeling somehow melted and relaxed and secure and fulfilled only through that vehicle of huffing and puffing, like that slam, bam, thank you, ma'am sort of routine. Because they're feeling that in their life, as they work, as they walk, as they look at the flower and so forth, Life becomes more artful all over when people are feeling better all over in society, actually. And then you get fashion, and then you get art, and you get creativity, and you get a wonderful planet we're going to see. But the engine behind that is usually a certain group of people who have taken this neuroscience to its fullest level, just like, scientists in a lab. But this kind of a difficult lab because people maybe think they're cults or people are not prepared for them. There are other people who pretend to be doing that and they're not really truly doing that. They're just doing some kind of version of exploitive sexual predation, like these bad cults that we hear about. So it's quite complex, the whole neurological, super esoteric level. But in a way, we are following. But by releasing this energy within the Tibetan community, when it was safe to do so, because they were sufficiently demilitarized to do that. And it's very interesting that in that same century where Tsong did this, the late 14th, early 15th, around 1400, That's when the Book of the Dead, which was Padmasambhava had planted in Tibet, was rediscovered by Karmalingba. And I remember, I think I had an insight that the reason it took 7 centuries from the late 8th century, from the 700s to the 1400s, or late 1400s, to remake the Book of the Dead really usable by the masses in the Tibetan society, is because there was still enough rigidity and stiffness and uptightness of militaristic, still the neural pattern, the tribal pattern, the thing in Tibet, even though the educationalism of the monastic universities was working against it from the 8th century, from the 700s, or even 600s. But it was still enough there that you couldn't release this level of energy. And then therefore the authorities in the society were hiding death from the people, not to make them depressed, and also make them more manageable. And because once people realize about death and becomes very much aware of the whole mechanism of death and the fact that death between lives is just part of life, then the less they're willing to be manipulated and conform to some socially necessary roles. And the more they want to develop themselves, and they will all want to be on scholarship and so forth. And then in the economy and the society is not prepared to support that, then they get frustrated and then they don't know what to do. So it's very interesting that this happened, this millennial consciousness arose, and at that time when it arose, people also started to face death in a new way. And because that's an important moment in the maturing of a society, where people become aware of their own impermanence, and thereby they want to get more out of their lives than just following some habitual professional pattern, make money or work on build a great wall or be a soldier or bear many children or whatever. We're just going to do that, and that's our contribution to the life, and then we're going to die and whatever, if you follow me. But we're not thinking about the dying, so we just go ahead mindlessly being a conformist. But when we become really aware of our death, people want to fulfill themselves in life. And that's where our planet is now. But then we have to develop the method of channeling that, so it doesn't become too chaotic and crazed. So now we're reaching the end of that 500 period, according to the Buddhist history, reaching the end of the 500-year period that Tsong renewed Shakyamuni's, presence, people's awareness of that presence, and therefore the benefit of using their own opportunity of human life to the full. He renewed that for 500 years in that sort of hidden mountain crucible, mountain-walled crucible that was Tibet. And now it's shattered everywhere in the world. And now we have to renew that in the whole world. And we can't afford, because the planet doesn't have the infrastructure to sustain a real Kali Yuga prediction that you have from conservative, Indian view of life, that it's just going to go downhill and everyone's going to kill everyone and it's going to be like Mad Max. It's basically like a Mad Max prediction, like a Hunger Games Mad Max predictions. The infrastructure planet will not sustain that. So Mother Earth is working with Buddha to insist that we have a similar revolution today on the planet, where beings are more fulfilled and everyone lives better than billionaires live, by sharing and by love and by altruism and by turning the cleverness, the engineering, the skill, the daring, the athleticism that has been monopolized mainly by warfare, turning it instead toward, well, you can still have Olympic warfare, you can have NBA leagues and things, sure. You know, you can have competitive sports, but turn all that energy into fulfillment, into freedom, using freedom creatively, lovingly, into being great yogis, being great chanters, being great bhaktis, being devoted and devout people, being truly humble Jews, being truly Islam, surrendering to compassion, to the deification of compassion, Allah Rahim, you know, deification of compassion, truly surrendering to that, not going out and killing in the name of it, and acting, having it support your vicious, paranoid ego, but surrendering to it, and then worshipping the Rahim. I believe the word for compassion in Arabic also relates to the word for a womb. The awareness of the female, I believe. I could be wrong. Shekhinah, the Jews, we have Mother Mary and the Shekhinah, the Christians. Buddhists have Tara. The Hindus have, Durga, Kali. When she gets put in a bad spot, she turns into Kali. And they have nice Tara also. And we all have Mother Earth. So now could be the time for an educationalist planet. Not Buddhist, educationalist. Where everybody on Earth has no student loans, free tuition, lifelong, for everybody. That was Buckminster Fuller, a total secularist. Buckminster Fuller's dream and vision, actually. Educationalism was. Everybody's giving a lifelong research fellowship to research reality. Many people will rather on a farm, or in between researching, they'll do some farming, they'll do some great. Now, everyone won't starve to death. We can easily support the infrastructure if we share and it's in a balanced way, and we don't have any dictatorship anyway of doing it either. We do it democratically, really genuinely democratically. We can easily do that. We really can. And we're going to. And we're going to, this decade, it's going to be the really starting of it. It is. 2020. And Tsong Khapa encourages us that this could be done. Because if you see it in Morphic Renaissance, Tsong Khapa, ultimately, he's not a Gelugpa, he's not a Tibetan, he's nothing on the planet. He's the sort of morphic resonance engine of the Renaissance. If you take the year 1400, 1450, I think Da Vinci's born 1452, I think, or whatever, you look around the planet and what is happening as far as revolutions, reformations, renaissances in different, the Kamakura period in Japan, Ming Dynasty in China, Mughal Dynasty, or good parts of it, and pretty soon you have Guru Nanak, who tries to make a bridge, who makes a new religion that bridges Hinduism and Islam, Sikhism, which they must turn back to in order to overcome the horrible thing about the partition of India and the Hindu-Muslim conflict. Cannot have that. Cannot. We have to reunify. And Guru Nanak is the great leader of how that could be done. So but educationalism makes it possible for everyone in every tradition. And so we can see Tsong Khapa as having shown that in an earlier context, and the new Renaissance that we need now, global Renaissance. Actually, I once wanted to found an institute. I think I bought the domain. I'm going to try to rebuy it. Global Renaissance Institute.com, .org, .net, .edu, GRI. That's what it can inspire us to want to do. Connects beautifully with Kalachakra and the great 14, my true mentor, my beloved mentor, grade 14, His Holiness Dalai Lama, who's the grade 14th Dalai Lama. Not that there won't be 15, there will, but he refuses to deal with the government because he wants it to be democratic. And I used to argue with him about it, but actually he's right, I'm wrong. Thank you, Your Holiness, for sticking to your guns on that. Back in the Ganden Podram, you go back to your Ganden Podram and you start teaching the world from there, and your 15th incarnation not coming. That will be the singularity. 2050 at the earliest. And teaching the world how to be happy, how to be more artful, more compassionate, like you are now doing. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Sorry I can't take questions. Actually, I was delinquent. I want to say I was very delinquent this week in my sequestering and worrying about symptoms and what have you, and worrying about Tibet House and how to survive, without being able to be normally open and so on. Have our normal programs at Menla and everything. I didn't look up on bobthurman.com in case you asked any questions.
No, we did.
I apologize. Nobody did ask any questions?
Not related to the class.
Please. You can put them now. I'll keep up a Tsong Khapa Renaissance Man question and answer dialogue, webinar, or whatever they call it. I'll do another one. I will. Maybe on some website. Because now that we're going to be shut down for a while, we're going to try to do some webinars and things. Try to create a little income for the Tibet House. So send in what you'd like a webinar on, for example. I'll do another course in April. I will. Since I don't have to go anywhere and I can't go anywhere, I'll just do it from here. This is the goddess room in Menla, Tibet House's Menla retreat and spa resort, to which we keep it heated. That's my feet get cold teaching here because we only turn it up for a few hours to be able to give you this broadcast. Okay, but I like to broadcast from Menla. That's great, and I will do more next weekend if I don't collapse. If I survive, is next coming weekend. Okay, all the best.
This video was brought to you in part through the generous support of the Tibet House US Menla Retreat and Dewa Spa membership community. To learn more about the benefits of Tibet House membership, please visit tibethouse.us. Tashi Delek, and thanks for tuning in.